Well, it really is a great honor to be part of this celebration here today.
Stor ære at få lov til at være en del af festligheden her i dag.
And this is a part of my own journey I want to share with you today.
Og det er en del af min egen rejse, jeg ligesom vil dele med jer her i dag.
And give some outside perspective on Ulla's ministry, not only here in Denmark, but in Europe and even further.
Og give ligesom et ydre perspektiv på Ulles tjeneste, ikke bare i Danmark og Europa, men også længere væk.
Ulla, you are a prophet and a pioneer.
Ulle, du er en profet og en pioner.
Not only in Denmark, but in Europe and globally.
Ikke bare i Danmark, men også i Europa og globalt.
And my own story takes me back to maybe the beginning of the new millennium.
Og min egen historie tager mig tilbage her til begyndelsen af det her årtusind.
I was back in my home country of New Zealand.
Jeg var hjemme i New Zealand.
And I saw a seminar being advertised, New Age for Dummies.
Og jeg så et seminar blive bekendtgjort New Age for idioter.
I thought that describes me, I'd better go.
Og jeg tænkte, det er lige noget for mig, så jeg må hellere tage med.
And my own interest had been aroused by an interesting encounter I had had. Let's see, it's just to say 4 years after you started your ministry.
Og min interesse blev vækket omkring 4 år efter Ulle begyndte sin tjeneste her.
I had been stranded in Budapest airport on my way to Sarajevo.
Så på vej til Sarajevo, så strandede Budapest.
And as a result, I and the other passengers on our way to Sarajevo had to stay for 2 extra nights in Budapest.
Og som følge af, at vi strandede på vej til Sarajevo, så blev vi nødt til at blive 2 ekstra nætter i Budapest.
The one other English-speaking person on this flight,
den eneste anden engelsktalende på flyet,
was a woman in her 40s.
Var en kvinde i 40-årsalderen.
She began asking me why I was going to Sarajevo.
Og hun begyndte at spørge mig, hvorfor jeg skulle til Sarajevo.
And long story short,
for at gøre en lang historie kort,
describes herself to me as a pagan.
Så beskrev hun sig selv som en hedning.
Jungian, follower of Carl Jung.
En jungianer.
Archetypal. Feminist psychotherapist.
En feministisk terapeut.
Now, I hadn't met many people who used that description before.
Jeg har ikke mødt mange med den her beskrivelse før.
And at first, we were talking about our common interests and projects in Bosnia.
Og først så talte vi om vores fælles interesser og projekter i Bosnien.
And we agreed to talk further when we got back to the hotel.
Og vi blev enige om, at vi ville tale videre, når vi kom tilbage til hotellet.
And as we talked, I realized here is a woman who had a spiritual sensitivity.
Og mens vi samtalede, så opdagede jeg, at her var der en kvinde, der havde en åndelig bevågenhed.
There were a number of areas of commonality that we had.
Der var en masse fællesnævner, vi havde.
She rejected the materialistic world.
Hun fornægtede den materialistiske verden.
And she was very interested in understanding the spiritual world.
Og hun var meget interesseret i at forstå den åndelige verden.
And she was very interested in understanding where I was coming from.
Og hun var meget interesseret i at få at vide, hvor jeg kom fra.
I told her some of my spiritual experiences.
Og så fortalte jeg historien om min åndelige oplevelse og rejse.
And there was quite a bit of common ground.
Og der var en hel del fælles grund.
Yet there were other areas where we seemed to be worlds apart.
Og så var der andre områder, hvor det var som om der var flere verdener imellem os.
In fact, the longer we talked with each other, I began to wonder, was I doing the right thing, having this conversation?
Faktisk så jo længere tid vi talte med hinanden, jo mere begyndte jeg at tænke over, om det var helt rigtigt at have den her samtale.
If men are from Mars,
hvis mænd er fra Mars,
and women are from Venus,
og kvinder fra Venus,
she seemed to be coming from Pluto.
så synes det som om hun kom fra Pluto.
And I began to wonder, am I talking with somebody who seems to be a leftover from a long forgotten era?
Og jeg tænkte på, taler jeg med en, som der blev efterladt af en ære, som er forladt for 100 år siden.
But at the same time, she began to deeply challenge me.
Men på det samme tidspunkt, så begyndte hun at udfordre mig dybt.
She really rattled my cage.
Fordi hun rystede min sjæl.
She challenged my presuppositions.
Fordi hun udfordrede alle mine forudindtagelser.
About God.
Omkring Gud.
And about life.
Omkring livet.
And I went to bed that night with many questions swirling in my mind.
Og der var mange tanker, der rullede rundt i mine tanker, da jeg gik i seng den aften.
Now, she set me on a course
Hun satte mig på en vej,
that was to bring me into contact with Ole,
som skulle senere bringe mig i kontakt med Ole.
which was why I was very interested in this seminar on New Age for Dummies.
Fordi det var sådan set derfor, jeg var meget interesseret i det her seminar i New Age for idioter.
It was being held in a Baptist theological seminary,
Det blev holdt på et baptist-seminar,
named after the famous Baptist missionary William Carey.
opkaldt efter den berømte baptistiske missionær William Carey.
And here I heard this Australian theologian
De hørte jeg en australsk teolog,
named Ross Clifford
hedder Ross Clifford,
telling us about how God had led him into ministry with people who were very spiritually alive, but not from a Christian perspective.
hvordan Gud havde ledt ham ind til en tjeneste, hvor folk var meget åndeligt vakte, men ikke fra et kristent perspektiv.
And some of the things that he was saying were really very radical for us to hear.
Og noget af det, han sagde, var virkelig radikalt.
He told us about this Lutheran priest in Denmark,
Han fortæller os om den her lutherske præst i Danmark,
who was even using tarot cards to explain gospel truth. Using tarot cards to explain gospel truth.
som brugte tarotkort til at vise Guds vej.
Now this seemed far too far-fetched for a Baptist theological seminary,
Det var fuldstændig langt ude for et baptistseminar.
until I began to realize, this was the very kind of strategy that William Carey used.
Og så tænkte jeg over, at det var præcis den samme strategi, som William Carey han havde brugt.
It represented classic missiology.
Den repræsenterer klassisk missiologi.
That is, understanding the worldview of the people you're trying to connect with.
Det vil sige, at man begynder at forstå den verdensopfattelse, de mennesker har, som du forsøger at nå.
Now, my own forefather was a co-worker with William Carey in India.
Min forfar var i familie.
Was a co-worker with William Carey. John Fountain. Worked with him in some of the translations into Sanskrit.
Og han var en af dem, som der var med til at oversætte Bibelen til sanskrit.
And they were criticized by their own missionary society
Og de blev kritiseret af deres egen missionsforening,
for straying from the real gospel.
fordi at de vandrede væk fra det ægte evangelium.
But the people back home didn't realize how important it was
Men folkene hjemme vidste ikke, hvor vigtigt det var.
to understand the worldview of those you're trying to communicate with and to build bridges with them.
At forstå den verdensbillede folk havde, som du forsøgte at kommunikere med.
So this was my first introduction to Ole,
Så det var min første introduktion til
the Lutheran priest with tarot cards.
lutherske præst med tarotkort.
And I was soon to discover more papers and books and so forth with which he was associated.
Og så begyndte jeg at opdage flere papirer og opgaver og bøger, som han var forbundet med.
So when I came back to Europe,
Så da jeg kom tilbage til Europa,
I was serving as the European Director for Youth with a Mission.
så arbejdede jeg som europæisk koordinator for ungdom med opgaver.
And so I began to look around and try to find people in Europe who were understanding the need to build bridges with people who were sensitive to the spiritual world but from a different perspective.
Og så begyndte jeg at lede efter folk, som der var følsomme eller var i stand til at bygge broer med folk fra miljøer, som der var åbne over for Helligåndens arbejde.
And I was amazed to discover so few people thinking about this.
Og jeg blev overrasket over, at der var så få mennesker, der arbejdede med det her.
I heard about a man in Switzerland from the Salvation Army,
Jeg hørte om en mand fra Schweiz,
Daniel Hardy.
Daniel Hardy,
And he was going regularly to New Age Mind, Body, Soul fairs.
og han tog ofte til sådan nogle kropsindhold-konferencer,
And he held a Jesus healing tent there.
og han havde sådan et Jesus helbredetelt.
And then I came across somebody in England, Steve Hollinghurst.
Mødte nogen i England, Steve Hollinghurst,
And I thought, well, I'll try to contact Ole Shedback Butson up in Copenhagen.
og så tænkte jeg, jeg må hellere prøve at ringe til Olskab i Madsen i København.
And we all came together in Basel, about 2006, I think it was.
Vi mødtes i Basel i 2006,
And we had several meetings like that
og vi havde forskellige møder af
to
den her,
try to share understanding of how we should proceed in this way, building bridges and communicating with people from a different approach to spirituality.
og vi delte, hvordan man skulle møde folk og bygge broer med folk fra forskellige spiritualiseringer.
And so I began to deeply appreciate how prophetic and how pioneering the work of the Master's light really was.
Og jeg begyndte at blive glad over, hvor profetisk og hvor pionerende i Mesterens lysarbejde faktisk var.
And a prophet often is without honor in his own country.
Og en profet er sjældent særlig agtet i sit hjemland.
And I'm glad that that's not completely true here, because you wouldn't be here otherwise.
Og jeg er glad for, at det ikke er helt sandt her, fordi ellers ville I jo aldrig være kommet.
But I do want to bring an outside perspective from Europe and from the other side of the world even.
Men jeg vil gerne bringe et perspektiv udefra fra Europa og fra den anden del af verden.
To say that Ulla's work truly on a global scale is very prophetic.
For at sige, at Oles arbejde globalt er et profetisk arbejde.
Very pioneering.
Meget pionerende.
And extremely strategic.
Og utrolig strategisk.
You see, after my encounter with this woman, I'll call her Diana, in Budapest, she so stimulated my thinking.
Så provokerede hun sådan mine tanker.
We've met several times subsequently.
Vi har efterfølgende mødtes flere gange.
And she made me see so many blind spots that I had.
Og hun fik mig til at se så mange blinde punkter jeg havde.
And to realize the blind spots of my movement and my own church.
Og fik mig til at se min bevægelses blinde punkter og hele min kirkes blinde punkter.
And as I began to think about the future of Europe,
og alt imens jeg begyndte at tænke på Europas fremtid,
I realized how significant the work of the Master's light represents.
Så indså jeg, hvor vigtigt i Mesterens lysets arbejde er.
You see, at first I thought Diana represented some, a piece of driftwood left high and dry after the tide went out.
Så jeg tænkte, at Diana her repræsenterer sådan en tidebølge fra tidevandet, der går ud.
She represented a long lost era.
En ære, som er forsvundet for lang tid siden.
Then I began to realize, no, she could well be the face of tomorrow's Europe.
Nej, så indså jeg, at hun faktisk repræsenterede morgendagens tro i Europa.
I began to realize that Europe will be shaped by a dominant worldview.
Og jeg begyndte at indse, at Europa vil blive formet af et dominerende eller et fremherskende verdensbillede.
It will either be materialistic or spiritual.
Det vil enten være materialistisk eller spirituelt.
Now, the last 150 years has been dominated by a materialistic worldview.
De sidste 150 år så er det blevet domineret af et materialistisk
But as we approach the new millennium,
men alt imens vi kommer ind til det,
we saw the rise of spiritual awareness as well.
Var der en stigende åndelig bevågenhed.
And it seems the pendulum is continuing to swing in that direction.
Og det ser ud til, at pendulet stadigvæk svang den her vej.
And so the question to me was,
og så mit spørgsmål var,
will Europe be shaped by a spirituality
vil Europa blive formet af en spiritualitet,
that is biblically rooted,
som er bibelsk funderet,
or a non-biblical spirituality?
Eller en ikke-bibelsk funderet spiritualitet.
And what will be the results of that?
Og hvad vil være resultatet af det?
You see, when we ask ourselves, what made Europe Europe?
Fordi når vi spørger selv, hvad var det, der gjorde Europa til Europa?
And we go back far enough.
Og vi går langt nok tilbage.
We go back to a time where our forefathers believed in many different gods.
Så går vi tilbage til en tid, hvor vores forfædre troede på mange forskellige.
And some of the names of the days of the week still are named after those gods.
Det er også derfor, at ugedagene har forskellige gudenavne.
I once did some research on the old Viking gods and saw how many there were in gods and goddesses.
Og jeg så en gang på vikingetidens gudepanorama, og så hvor mange der var.
And actually it must have been quite scary to have all those gods and goddesses looking over your shoulder to see if you were doing the right thing every moment of the day.
Det må være ret skræmmende at have en gud til at kigge ind over din hverdag, hver eneste hverdag, og sørge for, at du gjorde tingene ret.
Yet when Paul stepped ashore in Greece in Philippi,
men da Paulus steg land i Filippi,
he started a revolution in worldview.
Så startede han en revolution i verdensbilledet.
That took root all across Europe.
Som slog rødder overalt i Europa.
From Armenia, if you like, up into Iceland or Ireland.
Armenien til Irland eller Island.
And there was a shift from polytheism to monotheism.
Og det var et skift fra flere guder til at have en gud.
There was a general embracing of Jesus as the Son of God.
Og der var en generel omfavnelse eller opfattelse af Jesus som Gud.
And an understanding of how we should then live as creatures made in God's image.
Og en forståelse af hvordan vi som kristne skulle leve skabt i Guds billede.
And that has had profound impact on the course of European history.
Og det har haft en fuldstændig afgørende betydning for oprettelsen og skabelsen af europæisk historie.
We can describe Europe as a great paradox.
Vi kan beskrive Europa som et stort paradoks.
It's the continent that's been most shaped by the story of Jesus and the Bible.
Det kontinent, som er blevet mest formet af historien om den bibelske Jesus.
And by the rejection of that story and of the Bible.
Og samtidig er blevet formet af den største forkastelse af
But we cannot ignore the fact that those roots, the impact of that story has had huge, profound impact on the development of Western civilization.
Men sandheden er, at rødderne har haft stor indflydelse på udformningen af, hvordan hele det vestlige samfund og kultur ser ud.
But as that memory of that story has faded,
men alt imens historien om den her fortid, den ligesom forsvinder.
What is the logical consequence?
Hvad er så den logiske konsekvens?
Europeans will tend to go back to the worldview that existed beforehand.
Pæne tenderer til at gå tilbage til det verdensbillede, de havde før.
We are being reorientated.
Vi bliver
re-easternized, if you like.
Vi bliver restruktureret, hvis du vil.
And that's not going to be without consequences.
Og det kommer ikke til at ske uden konsekvenser.
And so it's so important to understand and take very, very seriously other forms of spirituality across Europe today.
Så det er utroligt vigtigt, at vi kigger på den rod, som vi har i vores åndelighed i Europa i dag.
In the first place, to learn from them.
Og i første omgang at lære af det.
Because there are so many blind spots that we have developed in our Christian tradition.
Fordi der er så mange blindepunkter, som vi har udviklet i vores kristne.
And I will always be grateful to Diana for having shaken and rattled my cage.
Og jeg er så glad for, at jeg mødte Diana, der ligesom rystede mig i min grundholdning.
And there is so much spiritual sensitivity that we can learn from other traditions.
Og der er så meget vi kan lære fra andre traditioner.
But still the mentality, at least in my constituency, is, well, yes, there are a few people over there, a very small marginal group, that can be grouped into some kind of spirituality area.
Men fra min baggrund, så er der en forståelse af, at der er en lille gruppe mennesker, der ligesom kan blive rubriceret ind i den her nyåndelighed.
But you see, they don't tend to show up in our senses because it's not organized, it's not institutional.
Men de dukker ikke op i vores optællinger eller noget som helst.
But it could be, for example, in Holland, up to a quarter of our population.
I Holland er det en fjerdedel af hele befolkningen.
And that's why I have a reputation for wearing out. Are you okay to go on? Do I need to do? And that's why it's very essential that we understand the spiritual environment of our society today.
Og derfor er det vigtigt, at vi forstår hele det åndelige omrids af den verden, vi lever i dag.
And Ulla has been the seer who saw it far earlier than the rest of us did.
Og Ulla er den seer, som så det før vi andre gjorde.
And I'm very grateful for your mentorship for myself and many others.
Og jeg er meget taknemmelig for, at du har set det og bragt det videre til mig selv og mange andre.
And want to acknowledge from a European perspective how key and how strategic the ministry of the Master's Light has been, is now, and I trust will be for a long time to come. Thank you very much.
Og det vi ser, det har strategisk betydning i Mesterens lys her, både i det der er sket, i det der sker nu og i fremtiden.